Untrodden Peaks and Unfrequented Valleys. Part 1. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Untrodden Peaks and Unfrequented Valleys, A Midsummer Ramble in the Dolomites, by Amelia B. Edwards. Chapter 1. Monte Generoso to Venice. Part 1. An autumn in North Italy, a winter in Rome, a springtide in Sorrento, brought summer round again, the rich Italian summer, with its wealth of fruits and flowers, its intolerable heat, and its blinding brightness. The barbarian tide had long ago set northwards and overflowed into Switzerland. Even those who had lingered longest were fain at last to turn their faces towards the hills, and so it happened that the writer and a friend who had joined her of late in Naples found themselves, about the middle of June, 1872, breathing the cooler airs of Monte Generoso. Here was a pleasant hotel, filled to overflowing, and numbering among its guests many Roman friends of the past season. Here, too, were green slopes, and shady woods, and meadows splendid with such wild flowers as none of us had ever seen elsewhere. The steaming lakes, from which we had just escaped, Como, Lugano, and Maggiore, lay in still shining sheets 3,000 feet below. The vast Lombard flats on the one side shimmered all day in burning mist to the far horizon. The great snow ranges bounding Switzerland and Tyrol on the other glowed with the rose of every dawn, and turned purple when the sun went down behind them in glory every evening. Having this wondrous panorama constantly before our eyes, with its changing lights and shadows, and its magical effects of cloud wreath and shower, catching now a sudden glimpse of the Finster air horn and the Bernese range, now an apparitional vision of Monte Rosa or the Matterhorn, or even, on a clear morning, from the summit behind the hotel, of the far distant Ortler Spitze on the Tyrolese border, we began somehow to think and talk less of our proposed tour in the Engadine, to look more and more longingly toward the north-east horizon, and to dream in a vague way of those mystic mountains beyond Verona, which we knew of, somewhat indefinitely, as the Dolomites. The Dolomites! It was full 15 years since I had first seen sketches of them by a great artist not long since passed away, and their strange outlines and still stranger coloring had haunted me ever since. I thought of them as every summer came round. I regretted them every autumn. I cherished dim hopes about them every spring. Sketching about Venice in a gondola a year before the time of which I write, I used to be ever looking towards the faint blue peaks beyond Murano. In short, it was an old longing, and now, high up in the mountain side, with Zermatt and the Engadine close within reach, and the multitudinous Alps extending across half the horizon, it came back upon me in such force as to make all that these great mountains and passes had to show seem tame and undesirable. Fortunately, my friend, whom I will call L for briefness, had also read and dreamed of the Dolomites, and was as eager to know more of them as myself. So we soon reached that stage in the history of every expedition when vague possibilities merge into planned certainties, and the study of maps and routes becomes the absorbing occupation of every day. There were, of course, some difficulties to be overcome, not only those difficulties of accommodation and transit which make the Dolomite district less accessible than many more distant places, but special difficulties arising out of our immediate surroundings. There was S, for instance, L's maid, who, being delicate, was less able for mountain work than ourselves. And there was the supreme difficulty of the courier, a gentleman of refined and expensive tastes, who abhorred what is generally understood by roughing it, despised primitive simplicity, and exacted that his employers should strictly limit their love of picturesque to districts abundantly intersected by railways and well furnished with first-class hotels. That this illustrious man should look with favour on our new project was obviously hopeless. So we discussed it secretly with bated breath, and the proceedings at once assumed the delightful character of a conspiracy. The Reverend John R., who had been acting for some weeks as English chaplain at Stresa, was in the plot from the beginning. He had himself walked through part of our Dolomite route a few years before, and so gave us just that sort of practical advice which is, of all help in travelling, the most valuable. For this, for his gallant indifference to the ultimate wrath of the courier, and for the energetic way in which, with a noble disregard of appearances, for which we can never be sufficiently grateful, he made appointments with us in secluded summer houses, and attended stealthy indoor conferences at hours when the servants were supposed to be at meals, I here beg to offer him our sincere and hearty thanks. All being at last fully planned, it became necessary to announce our change of route. The great man was accordingly summoned, the rider, never famous for moral courage, ignominiously retreated, and L. the Dauntless undertook the service of danger. Of that tremendous interview no details ever transpired. Enough that L. came out from it composed but victorious, and that the great man, greater than ever under defeat, comported himself thenceforth with such a nicely adjusted air of martyrdom and dignity as defies description. Now, there are 3 ways by which to enter the Dolomite district, namely, by Botzen, by Bruneck, or by Venice, and it fell in better with our after plans to begin from Venice. So on the morning of Thursday the 27th of June we bade farewell to our friends on Monte Generoso, and went down in all the freshness and beauty of the early morning. It was a day that promised well for the beginnings of such a journey. There had been a heavy thunderstorm the night before, and the last cumuli were yet rolling off in a long billowy rack upon the very verge of land and sky. The plains of Lombardy glittered wide and far, Milan gleamed, a marble speck in the mid-distance, and farthest seen of all, a faint, pure obelisk of snow, traced as it were upon the transparent air, rose Monte Viso, 120 miles away. But soon the rapidly descending road and thickening woods shut out the view, and in less than 2 hours we were down again in Mendrisio, a clean little town containing an excellent hotel, where travellers bound for the mountain, and travellers coming down to the plains, are wont to rest. Here we parted from our heavy luggage, keeping only a few small bags for use during the tour. Here also we engaged a carriage to take us on to Como, where we arrived about midday, after a dull and dusty drive of some 2 hours more. It was our intention to push on that afternoon as far as Bellagio, and in the morning to take the early steamer to Lecco, where we hoped to catch the 9:25 train reaching Venice at 4:30. Tired as we now were, it was pleasant to learn that the steamer would not leave till 3, and that we might put up for a couple of hours at the Hotel Volta, not only the best in Como, but one of the best in Italy. Here we rested and took luncheon, and despite the noontide blaze out of doors, contrived to get as far as that exquisite little miniature in marble, the cathedral. Lingering there till the last moment, examining the cameo-like bas-reliefs of the façade, the strange beasts of unknown date that support the holy water basins near the entrance, and the delicate Italian Gothic of the nave and aisles, we only ran back just in time to see our effects being wheeled down the pier, and to find the steamer not only crowded with passengers, but the deck piled funnel-high with bales of raw silk, empty baskets, and market produce of every description. End of Section 1.